Hello, and thank you for joining the Champion Within podcast, your premier go-to spot for unlocking your winning mindset. Whether you're an athlete looking to elevate your game to the next level, a coach leading the charge, an enthusiastic parent cheering from the sidelines, or an educator molding young minds, the Champion Within podcast episodes are packed with value, sharing the tools and strategies to unlock your potential and rise to new heights. Hosted by mentor, coach, and mindset leader Kate McCauley. Let's sit back and enjoy today's episode while discovering your champion within. And now, here's Kate.
Hey champions, thank you for joining me on the Champion Within today. I have a guest that I know we are going to learn a lot from today. I have had the opportunity to see him in action on softball fields. He actually lured my husband in to getting into the volunteer space. I believe it was first to coach T-ball, and then somehow he's still on those boards of softball, baseball, football, all the things. And honestly, I do love that he does that, but I vividly remember sitting on the hill. They were giving out medals for the end of T-ball. I think I was handing out water ice, and he yelled up the field, "Hey, Dan!" And then here we are, however many countless years later. So today's guest is KJordan. He has been coaching in the youth sports space, for 20 years. It's baseball, softball, football, and basketball. He's coached over 70 teams, I think I have correct there, Ken.
When I counted them all up, yep.
Counted them. All right. I love it. He's got hundreds of kids that he's been able to coach, which I know that we're all going to be leaning in to steal some wisdom and learn from not only his success, but things where he had to navigate through maybe some setbacks. When I asked him to tell me about himself for a bio, he wrote, "I'm a father, husband, coach, loan officer, and leader," in that order. And I just love the way that all comes together. I know you're going to be leaning in, as I said, to steal Ken's advice on how we can take some lessons and put it into not only sports, but our life in general. Ken, how are you today?
Nervous. Advice is always a dangerous thing.
Oh, okay. I hope I wasn't making you nervous. Sometimes people say, we're not sure what we're getting into.
No.
You're right. Advice is a dangerous thing. I like to say, don't give any unsolicited advice. Ask, do you want advice here?
Yeah.
And it's hard not to, right? Give it, especially when you have all that experience. Tell me, how did you get into coaching?
Well, it's funny, the same way Dan got into coaching, right? I have vivid memories of my mom, single mom raising 4 boys, where sports was the tether to sanity for us 4. It gave us something to do. It kept us out of trouble to a degree. I'm not going to say that me and my brothers didn't get in trouble. We found ways, unique, creative ways to get into trouble. But sports was one of our foundations in, something consistent, a place we needed to be, a place we needed to perform and do our best. And we obviously enjoyed it. But one of my best memories is seeing my mom in the snack stand. It was Upper Darby Little League, Marshall Road Field, Up until that point, it felt like a guest. It felt like I was showing up at the field to play a game, and I kind of view it as like a paying customer. I'm just there because, I paid my registration fee to be on a team. But when my mom was in the snack stand, it was the first time I felt like I belonged there. Like it changed me from being a guest to it felt like a home, so to speak.
I love that.
And it stayed with me. And when my son, who's now 24 years old, which I can't even fathom that that's the case, started T-ball down at Black Rock, he actually started football. Now, back then, they were putting kids in pads at 4 years old, which still boggles my mind, but
right.
We were doing it.
We learned a little.
Right. I got the same feeling like I was there as a paying customer. I was there as a guest, and it was the following spring where I'm like, it kind of dawned on me, like, why do I, feel this way? And and that's when I remembered the whole experience of growing up. I'm like, I volunteered to coach T-ball, and that was my first entry into any youth sports. And of course, as most coaches of youth sports will tell you, it pulls you in, especially when you start to see the opportunity to bring real world lessons and knowledge into this this stage, which is what it is. I mean, it's just a stage where they get to act out and practice all of these life skills with very little consequences in the grand scheme of things, and get good at it and practice these things so that when there are real consequences, they already have certain muscles built. And that was from the age of 4. And of course, I coached from Liam when he was 4 to the time he was 16 through baseball, basketball, travel teams, in-house teams, all that. And then I remember going from 16-year-old baseball back to 8-year-old softball. And coached my daughter Bella for a couple of years. Then I jumped ahead and I started coaching Caitlin as she progressed into her high school years. And then she went off to college and I went back to coaching Bella, who I still coach today. So I'm still coaching softball today,
right?
At least for now. So
I'm jumping in to interrupt this podcast to share that I've dropped mindset mode. This is a private podcast for people who don't have time to sit still, but know something needs to shift. $7 a month gets you bite-sized tools so that you can breathe through the stress, deal with drama, build confidence, push through fear, break the mental junk holding you back. This isn't some sit on a cushion for an hour type of vibe. It's real, it's fast, it's for the doers, the busy parents, the athletes, the goal-getters who feel stuck or overwhelmed. Pop in your earbuds and hit play, because if you want different results, you gotta do something different. Your momentum starts here. Mindset Mode is live. Let's go. I'm so excited for you to access this. Go to the show notes after this podcast, tap on the link, and it's all yours. So many things that I would love to pull from all of that. One, I love that connection, the snack stand, and feeling like now I feel like I'm a part of this. I'm part of the organization as opposed to just a paying customer showing up, playing, because I have never looked at it that way before. And I've spent many hours in snack stands and honestly have some days been like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can scoop another water ice. But other days have had so many laughs and funny things happen and made really just memories, core memories with parents that I was in there working with. And my kids, Black Rock Field, for those of you who are not local, is our local softball, baseball, and football field. And my kids quite literally will say they grew up down there because Ryan was an infant, my youngest of 3, when Danny was playing flag football and t-ball. I really love that. And I hope that my kids someday look back and think about that. I want to think that they will, because literally they would be there, from set up in the morning till the last piece of trash is picked up off of the field. Because as you said, you get sucked in that volunteer thing. I'm curious, and there's so many things that I want to talk about with what you just said. What is your favorite youth sport? I just saw your face. It's a hard one to pick. What's your favorite youth sport to coach? Do you have one?
Well, hands down, it was baseball, right? So I'm like kids, their favorite sport is the sport they're playing right now, right? Like if you ask a kid during basketball season, what's his favorite sport? He's going to tell you basketball.
Makes sense.
Ask him during football season, he'll tell you football. And that's kind of the way I've always felt, is that I love them all, but my favorite sport is the sport I'm coaching now. But I will say this, and right now I'm only coaching softball, but I will say this. The biggest eye-opener for me was going from baseball to softball. So many people think softball is just baseball with a bigger ball, right? And it could not be further from the truth when you talk about not only the rules of the game, the strategies of the game, they're very different. Anybody that's coached both will tell you they're very different. But the kids, boys and the girls, are so
the biggest difference you see there between coaching the boys and the girls. That's a great difference for people to think about, because it's a shift.
It is. And one thing I learned early on, Kate, is that girls are way tougher than boys. I was
tougher. How?
Tougher in that they will take a line drive off the shoulder and fight back their tears and want to get right back in it. Whereas a boy, you give me an 11-year-old boy that takes a line drive off the shoulder, and you think that we're going to have to take him straight to the morgue.
You're right.
The world's coming to an end. And that was even going from my 8-year-old girls they just seem so much tougher after having coached boys for
that is.
I think that there's a lot of reasons. I think that girls aren't given enough credit for how tough they are, number one. And number two, I think that they're also fighting a stereotype. I mean, these girls are out here, they're competing in sports, which is predominantly, at least on the national stage for a long time, predominantly male activity. And they don't want to be viewed as soft.
Right.
And I think that gives them a little bit of a chip on their shoulder to be a little tougher. And God bless them for it. I love it. You know what I mean? But when it comes to the difference between the boys and the girls and how much, and the reason why I think I prefer, if I had to go do it all over again, I wouldn't change anything. But I do prefer coaching female athletes because I think male athletes are given far more opportunities to exercise these skills that we're teaching them in different areas, multiple sports. And female athletes aren't given the same number of opportunities. So I think that my role as a softball coach had more purpose because I knew that I was going to have them for a short period of time. And, you know, this was their opportunity to learn about mental toughness, about, you know, teamwork, cooperation, you know, which girls are soft skills are already better at certain cooperation and things like that. But the ability to fight through adversity and set goals. And like, I just don't know if that's happening at the same level for female athletes. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean.
No, I mean, the work that I do, I see that a lot, that the female athletes have to prove it more, definitely. And that they are definitely not given the same advantage. You know, fields are taken away. Oh, different practice times, different things are happening. Even when you see a really good athlete at the professional level, people are like, oh, wow, let's compare her to all the guys. You know,
Yeah.
You see that with Caitlin Clark and different people. It's like, in her own right, you know, she's successful, but it's always comparing to the male athletes and TV spots, all kinds of things. There's so many different spokes really in the female athletic industry that is still lacking. So I think you're right that even young girls feel it, see it, maybe people are talking about it. How do you teach? And I know you and I have had a little bit of work together in a workshop with an amazing softball team, but how do you as a coach, if a coach is listening right now, how do you teach that resilience and life lessons to boys and girls really? But do you do something, or in the moment, can you think of a story where you had to do that?
I don't know. I can't think of a particular moment, but what I can say is understanding that what upset them is probably not what they're really upset about is an important thing to try and focus on, especially as a coach who's competitive. Like, I know you're competitive. I know I'm competitive. So yes, winning is important, but, and I get frustrated too. Sometimes I get frustrated for them when they're not playing their best. And when a kid makes a mistake, recognizing that the reason they're upset is not because they made a mistake per se, but
Right.
because they let their teammates down. That's more true than the other. One is more true than the other. And a lot of coaches, especially dads, and I remember as a dad, I didn't always make the best decision on what to say to my son or to my daughter. I don't always make the right call at the right time on how to make them feel better. You know, but as a coach, one of the things I learned early on is that, you know, focus on what they're really upset about and address that. Because if you get down on them, like, you know, who cares? You made a mistake, big deal. That trivializes their true. No, it's not that I made a mistake. It's that I let my teammates down. And we all know that there's a social structure that's built on whether or not you are helping your teammates win or not as a young person.
Everyone's like, be a good team player, all those things, which is important. I remember Danny, who is 19 now, and I had to think for a second there. And it was after a football game. He was miserable and they almost won this game. It was a great game. He played excellent. And this was the day we decided we're not going to talk about this in the car anymore.
Yeah, that's a great rule, by the way. I learned that from you.
Yeah. So my dad was our coach and we always talked about it in the car. And I love my dad. He's one of the best coaches I've ever had. He's going to be on the podcast soon. But, you know, that was the toughest part, driving home sometimes, because I'm not only an athlete, I'm his daughter too. And my brothers felt the same, not just me. But I remember Danny saying all of these things, a long list of how he let the team down. And he, without saying those words, he was saying, you know, well, I didn't do this for the team and I should have got this. So this kid would have got the touchdown. You know, he was analyzing every little detail of it. And in that moment, he couldn't see. I mean, it was like he was seeing red. He couldn't see his good game. So I made a rule that we're not going to talk about this. So, and then it was hard as an
Yeah.
athlete and being competitive. If he brought it up, we would talk about it. But it was, hey, you want to go to Wawa? Do you want to get, something from the snack bar in between the next game if it were tournament basketball? So I think that it's so true. There's a lot of pressure on kids, not only individually, but to be a good teammate when they let someone down.
And think about why. Like, they are all broke, first of all, right? So their status symbol, like their status doesn't come from how much money they have, doesn't come from the car they drive, right? Like,
yeah.
As an athlete, when you're on the field, when you're part of a team dynamic, your status can be, if you're not careful, can be completely tied to how well you help the team win. And look, that's also some kids who are really, really good. That's also how they become jerks. Let's face it, right? Like, grow up to become jerks because they're good and their status was so high. And then there's other kids who struggle, who go in the other direction and just become more introverted or walk away from a sport and all this other stuff because it's their status. And I think that was another thing that I learned early on. Like, I had to find a way to separate the two so that I could talk to all the kids about what this sport is doing for them and not just like, hey, let me praise this one kid because he's the one that hit the 3 home runs today.
So if a coach is listening right now and you're in that situation, you just said, you got to see that it's more than just that mistake, that error that they made, the missed foul shot, whatever the situation is. Let's just say you're in that situation. And I'm the athlete. What are you going to say to me?
I always, everything is an opportunity. And, one of my favorite pieces of advice, this was after a very difficult couple of situation in my mortgage business where, a couple of people that I'd mentored, I'd worked with, for a couple of different reasons had left, got recruited away, right? Was devastated. And what I'd said to someone who I trust, a guy I talk to pretty frequently, I'm telling him, like, oh, you all right? I'm like, this and that. He's like, oh, that's awesome. And I'm like, completely threw me back. And it reminded me, and it's funny because learning sometimes is just remembering. And he had reminded me that, everything is an opportunity. And even this, somehow, some way is an opportunity. What I try and do, and I've always done with my players, is especially when they make a mistake, right? It's like, okay, cool. You made a mistake. That's awesome. Because now you get to experience the mistake. You get to practice overcoming the mistake. You get to succeed again in spite of the mistake. And you start to help them realize that the mistakes they make are critical to their success. And if they are winning all the time and they're never making mistakes, they're in the wrong place. They're in the wrong place because they're not being challenged enough, not being pushed enough, so they're not growing enough. And I think that as a more of a global part of the conversation is that, always looking for a way to turn it into an opportunity without being, a Sesame Street character, which
right.
You have to be careful.
You gotta get real because kids are like, all right, this guy is so corny.
That's cool.
Hey, let's celebrate that. And honestly, I don't think you or I could even do that. But I'm not even going to say the team name. But when I was coaching youth basketball, because if I said the team name, some people would remember the little chants that they used to do. This one coach clearly was not a basketball player. That's fine. All right. Yeah. We're at the youth level. I'm not expecting that. He was a dad of one of the little girls. He would celebrate the errors, the mistakes, the turnovers as if it was the championship game of the NBA. And I was just like, I am not feeling this, but I love how you're saying, all right, what's the opportunity here? That's awesome. I was picturing you maybe saying that to an athlete and then the first time you said them giving you a look like, that's awesome. But then when you dig a little deeper and say, how can we learn from this? Because anytime I've had a failure in life, whether it's athletically, personally, professionally, if I've leaned into what could I do next time to improve this? How could I change this? I learned so much. And I love that you said, if you're winning, yeah, that's fun and all, but you're not really growing as an athlete. When you get into the real world, you mentioned your business, you're going to have situations where you need to navigate through some stressful things or setbacks, a change in staff or whatever it may be, a change in your whole career. I really think that athletics, sports in general, helps people do that. Do you find in your own work that maybe you're not high-fiving everybody all the time, or maybe you are, but do you find that the coaching, the athlete of you, side of you comes into what you do?
Well, there's no doubt that in our business, especially if you get into sales, like if kids, if they get into sales very much is a scoreboard game. And having a scoreboard mentality can be a blessing and a curse, but more often than not, it does drive, success in sales at least. And it's hard for people who are not in sales or not in a scoreboard, business. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs are very much in a scoreboard business too. Some people are 9 to 5, they're not in a scoreboard business. So it's kind of hard to kind of pull the lessons from sports into that. But at the same time, sports is just an efficient way to build the framework for setting goals, measuring, and then reflecting back on how well you did, and then making changes. And I think that can be done in any aspect of your life. I think that growing up in sports was not, it wasn't the athlete in me that brought me back to sports. It was actually the fact that, what I learned in sports kind of helped me into my early part of my career as a salesperson. But then as I grew into a leader in the industry, it was the work that I did there that helped me grow as a coach and not the other way around. So it was like, it was more of a serve. Like it started as an athlete that took me into sales. But when you're a salesperson, especially a young salesperson, I was blind to the industry and how it worked and the ins and outs and things like that. I was just strictly focused on how many loans can I originate in a month. Then I got into leadership and I started to realize like there's so many other ways to keep score. It was so much more fulfilling too, being in mentorship and leadership in the industry. And that's what pushed me to do a lot more reading, a lot more learning, and a lot more work on myself. And it was just like, wow, now I get to go back and give this stuff. Like how many kids have a coach that read Think and Grow Rich and is really pulling the definiteness of purpose?
I love that you're bringing that up.
I mean,
you post all the time. Sorry to jump in, but I don't want to forget this. You post all the time different books that you're reading that I've read some. I'm like, oh, that looks good. I'm always adding things to my list of this is what I need to read. So what are you reading right now? And are you bringing that into any of your sports spaces and how?
So now I will tell you this. All right. So I just moved, as you know, right? Mm-hmm. So I took a hiatus from reading and getting up early and meditating and all that stuff simply because like I had my work and my move and I couldn't really think about anything else. But now I'm getting back into some routine, so I'm excited. The last book I read was a book called Breath. And actually, breath and breathe, like they're spelled the same way, right?
Right.
Not mistaken. So I don't know what the book's called.
Okay.
You
recommend it. What did you love about it?
Yeah, but what I really was the science behind breathwork and how it impacts your health, but also how it impacts your state of mind and your sympathetic nervous system and all those things, and how to calm yourself down, how to rest, how to do these things. Absolutely. As soon as I was like literally finishing a chapter and going right to practice, like, all right, I want to talk about this today.
I love it.
Especially in those moments, where a girl's on the mound and she just walked in a run and she's worked up and she's mad at the umpire and, because of the strikes and the balls and I'm able to go out there on a visit and say, okay, let's do some breathing real quick, and I'm like, I learned it right from the book,
This is amazing. I teach breathwork in addition to a lot of the stuff that I do. And I'm going to be honest, it's because of when I was the teacher, I wasn't trained, but I would often try in the moment of craziness, if I were going to just be completely honest here, to say, let's calm down, let's breathe. And then my youngest guy with his uniquely beautiful brain in school, I started to learn a little bit more about breath work. And then I got fully trained in it. Breathing is so powerful because it can just bring you back to the present moment. It can calm your nervous system, as you said. What people don't realize that most of us, your book may or may not have mentioned this, that we're shallow breathers and we don't breathe properly. We've never been taught how to breathe correctly. And when you can teach an athlete how to do this breath work, and there's so many different ways, and it's not like you have to do it for like 3 hours straight. You can literally 2-3 minutes, teach someone how to do it. Now, it does take practice. You have to put the reps in, just like you would for any sport. But then when they can pull that out on the mound and in regular life, having a difficult conversation before they get on that sales call, it's this ripple effect. It is so incredibly powerful. I've done it with pro athletes too. And they're even like, well, where's this been my whole life? So you're going to have to tell me the author of who that book is, and we'll definitely drop it in there for people who are listening. Was it teaching you different types of breath work in that book?
It did. So it goes through, obviously it goes through a whole host of science and anecdotal, stories and things. But at the end, it gives you techniques to practice
Really cool.
and cadences and all that stuff, which, some of them I took to, right away, like burst breathing. I'm sure you
Yeah,
know.
do you want to share one? I was going to say, do you want to share one?
That's my favorite right now.
Okay.
I take as deep a breath as I possibly can, and then I take another quick burst to just
in through your nose
in
or
through my nose.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I hold it, sometimes I don't, and then exhale, slowly. And honestly, like I'm at the point where, regardless of the situation, if I do that 3 or 4 times, I'm back to normal. And where I'm really finding it helps is going to sleep. I was one of those people whose brain would not shut off, and I toss and turn, and all the problems, all the worries, all the fears of tomorrow and the next day are out there. But that helps me. I mean, I can be asleep in a matter of minutes using that technique. So that was one I really, really loved from that book.
Yeah, and it's easy. People don't realize they're easier than you think. And I tell people, oh, let's do breath work. They're like, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
You do have to practice it a little bit. When you start doing it on a regular basis, as you said, you will go to that. Your brain will literally just say, this is what I do in this situation. So before you go to sleep, before you have to talk with someone, that big game, whatever it might be. I love that. I can't wait I'm going to look at the book myself and read it, probably steal some new things. There's a ton of different ways to do breath work. That's the other important thing that people have to remember. Yes, there are gurus out there that will say, this is the only way, that way. But when you really start looking at it, you can do like a 4 breath in and then 8 out. There's so many different ways. Just like anything in life, you have to find what works for you. So for the listeners, you could try that burst breathing, try the different types of breath work. If you check out that book or send me a message, I'll send you some, but it's okay if you don't like one. There's so many ways to do breath work, which is really, really powerful.
And it's like advice. This is something that worked for me this one time. Like it may not work for you, and maybe it works for you in a different moment. But yeah, no, that was a cool book. That was one of the last one I read, and now I'm just picking up and rereading Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who was an FBI hostage negotiator. And the whole idea around negotiation has a negative, manipulative connotation to it in our world. But with the reality, if you read this book, is that it's really about helping people uncover and move to what they really want. Even people who are holding other people hostage, they don't want to be holding people hostage. You know what I mean? Like they're like, and that's just a really, really obviously extreme example of, but most people, the process of negotiating is helping them to uncover what it is they really want, and then showing them a way to get there. Even in my business, like people are like, oh, I just want the lowest monthly payment. Like, well, that's what you said, but let's talk about and let's communicate. And what the book teaches how to communicate to get people to understand what they really want,
So you have one tip from that book, if you could put the communication in where people could use it either in sports, coaching?
The one that I guess that stands out the most is when people make unreasonable requests, which is often, even athletes make unreasonable requests. You just simply ask them, how do you expect me to do that? Like, how can I do that? Right. And it's a simple question, but it puts the onus back on them to figure out what needs to happen in order for them to get what they want. And it also helps to bring more of a collaborative energy to the conversation instead of a demand and a granting of the wish, so to speak. And it's helped me in a lot of different situations. So just asking the question like, how do you want me to do that? It's also a human nature thing to get them to start thinking in a little bit of a different way. That's really, really helped me with unreasonable requests.
What do championship teams, standout students, and elite companies all have in common? A trained mindset. The Champion Within programs aren't fluff. They're mental performance blueprints that build focus, resilience, confidence, and clarity when it counts. Now is the time to set this up. Not next season, not next quarter, now, when the pressure is real and the habits are forming. Whether you're on the field, the courts, in the classroom, or leading a boardroom, Your people need transformation and mindset training. Let's partner. Let's co-create this. Let's build the mindset that fuels the next level. Schedule a quick call. Just go to the show notes after the podcast and use the link. Let's design the exact experience your people need because they already have the talent. Now we build the belief. That's a great way to co-create something with someone or to let them reframe it themselves. Because when you get an unreasonable request, a couple of things can happen from my point of view. Maybe we think it's unreasonable because we can't see their vision.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not as unreasonable as we think, or maybe it is completely unreasonable. And when you ask that question, how could we do that? How do you expect that to happen? What does that look like for you? However you want to phrase it. And then if they start saying things back like, you know what, the more I think about this, I don't even think this is possible, because sometimes people are being unreasonable and they don't even realize how unreasonable they're being until you ask something. I'm going to steal that, Ken. I knew we were going to have some things where everyone could steal, but I mean, I feel like I could use that with my teenagers. I could use that in business. I love to co-create things and say, you know, to a coach or even a big business, what's going on with your people? How can we create this? And sometimes they do say things to me and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm only going to be there for an hour and a half, you know, like, so then if I say something like, all right, well, how do you see that happening? Maybe they have something I don't realize, you know?
Yeah, like, Kate, why you come into a half day for free? Like,
yeah.
How do you expect?
How do you see that happening? Yeah. Well, yeah. You know what, Ken? I'm going to have to pause and do some breath work. Again, say that if someone says that to me. Because, you know, sometimes people are working in a budget. I get it. But then there's sometimes where I'm like, honestly, you guys are a big business, like a huge business. Like, that's not free. But it comes across much better if I say, how do you see that happen?
Yeah, it's way better than, what are you, nuts?
Yeah, are you crazy? I got to keep my Philly in check when I have people all over the place. You know, it's funny. But I love that. I think that's great. I think I shared actually in our workshop, and I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast before, but it's from an FBI agent, that when you're talking with someone, and if it's an athlete, your kid, someone you're working with, any relationship, really, you're in a million relationships, not just the ones you wear a jersey for, to be honest. When they end saying like, this was the worst game ever, or this day was terrible, you take those last couple words, like they would in the interrogation. I think I shared it with you and all of the parents in our workshop. And you say to them, the worst day ever?
Question mark.
Right, with a questioning tone. And then you have to pause, which is hard. You know, use your breath work there, people, and wait, because they will start telling you things. And then they may end again with something like, and I just can't stand her, or that coach hates me. That coach hates me, or that coach hates you. You know, you rephrase it a little bit and you will get a lot of information, sometimes more than you expect. But again, it was an FBI interrogation thing.
It's in the book. It's in that book.
Is it in there?
Yeah.
I was trying to think. I actually saw it. I didn't read that book yet, but I'm going to get that one too on my list. I think I saw him in a one of those like masterclass type things. Like I watched some videos from him from that. I believe that's where I got that. Anyway, really
Good
cool
stuff.
Yeah.
And your classes are awesome. I was very fortunate to have you in with our girls. I guess it was over the winter or the fall of
I think it was this past November. Yeah.
And just, you know, again, just reiterating that female athletes and male athletes, they have some similar struggles, but they have some that are unique to them. And I loved how you put that class together for them rather than just some cookie cutter, you know, class that you know you can't give the same class to it's a lot of same principles. You can't deliver to a group of 16-year-old girls the same way you would deliver to a boardroom, right? But you can learn the principles, you can learn the techniques, and then, you know, make the adjustments.
Honestly, it's different from the boys to the girls. You know, when I work, same like you were saying, working with the guys and the girls is very different. And thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I loved working with you and your athletes. You know, when we work together and all my coaches, people first is really what it's all about. Someone did. It's funny you said cookie cutter. Someone actually said to me when I left my teaching career, and this is a big time speaker, well respected, and I've learned a lot from her, but this just didn't sit right with me. She said it needs to be copy paste like cookie cutter. And I was like, no. She was like, what? You know, and she's been on some really big stages, which I respect that. And maybe for some things that works. But when you're going in and you're doing a workshop and even a keynote for me, I really want to co-create that with people. Maybe it's the teacher in me. I just could never, I mean, from one class to the next, like you said, it's the same lesson. It's different people. So yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate you saying that. I really did love your athletes, and I love seeing them on social media being successful. You know, when we were in that session and we talked beforehand, you were talking about how playing is a privilege, and, you know, and learning. We talked a little bit about learning from mistakes already, but pushing through that. How do you think coaching is a privilege? I'm going to flip it a little bit on you. How is coaching a privilege? I heard you a couple of times say, I get to in different areas of your life. What do you think about that with coaching?
Well, I mean, it's a responsibility for one, like you have to be willing to take that on. We have a guest in the,
I just saw a fly go by and I'm like ready to kill one of my kids. So I'm like, who the heck let another fly in?
Everything is a privilege. Everything in life is a privilege. I get to be the loan officer that helps this particular borrower through this really, really, really difficult file instead of, oh, why do I get the ones that are really hard? You know what I mean? Like, so it's really it's a practice. It's a habit of reframing. And coaching is no different. I mean, but specifically, I get to make the schedule, right? That's huge.
Yeah.
I get to decide what messages we're going to deliver. What's our goal for the year on, you know, a lot of times you look at a developmental sheet and you're like, okay, by the time they're done this season, they should know how to do X, Y, and Z. And of course, as you get older, those skills get more and more nuanced. Well, same with the mental side of it, you know, and if I get to coach another 8-year-old softball team, I already know like the things that I would want to teach them in that year. And it is a privilege to be the one that gets to decide what these girls are going to be walking away with, what knowledge and lessons they're going to be walking away with. And I get to talk first, too. At the end of games, coach gets to talk.
You do.
As a head coach, you get to talk first. If my assistant coaches are lucky, there'll be a little bit of meat on the bone for them to talk about when I'm done. But that's very rare. I usually cover a lot of ground in my conversations with them.
My husband, Dan, who you pulled into that youth sports world, he said, oh, this is going to be a great conversation. Ken loves to talk. He's like, it's go to you. I was like, I'm not sure if what you're saying there, but okay.
Yeah.
But so true. So many privileges. You know, you get to share your words with them. You get to say things that change their life, not only in that sport, but in the world. You don't even realize it. And I'm sure you could think back to people that have coached you and impacted you in different ways. I'm thinking of my college coach right now. His keywords, I guess we'll call them, pop into my brain, and my roommates and I will text each other and say, hey, and we'll use some of his lines as a joke, as real life lesson type things. It's important for all the coaches to remember that you get to do this, and it is a privilege, just like for my athletes, it's a privilege for them to play.
If you think about it, your internal dialogue, this is such a crazy thing, but your internal dialogue usually is made up of echoes of what people have said to you in the past. And unfortunately, when kids grow up with critical parents or a hypercritical coach, which we've seen, like those words don't go in one ear and out the other. They go in one ear and they bounce around for the rest of their lives. If I know one thing as a human being, that I have enough of that echoing around in my brain, you know, that sometimes doesn't serve me. And as a coach, and why what you do is so important, is putting words that are going to echo later, like your coach did in college. Like, it's not just some of it's funny, but the reality is that, you know, you're having a conversation with yourself all day, every day. What else? Who else is talking? Well, typically it's the echoes of people you care about, people you trusted, people you looked up to. And not all of us had the luxury or the privilege of having someone put positive stuff into our brain to echo around. Some of us only had negativity around us. And that's the other privilege of being a coach, is I get to be the guy who's going to plant some positive echoes for you later on in life when you're in the middle of something with your friends, like, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember Ken saying that, you know. That's the biggest privilege of all.
It's so true. And we don't even know all of the things that are floating through people's brains, obviously, but all the things that people are saying. You know, a kid walks to school, gets on the bus, something happened at home before. They're not going to spill that all out to you, but it is floating through their brain all day, through the rest of their life. They might not even realize, you know, they're an adult and things pop up that was maybe said only a couple times or maybe said every single day. The good news is it takes work, but you can retrain your reticular activating system to retrain those thoughts. I'll be honest, when I left my teaching career and now in business, I really had no clue what I was doing, of course, but a lot of those voices from the administrators, one in particular said to me, "You'll never work in education again," and I was like, so for a long time, I'm like, I'm not going to go into schools. But I was saying, like, my heart was broken. It's really because that message was floating through my brains. Now I go into schools and do a lot of things, but it took some healing and rewiring of my brain. And even things like, I started the day at 7:25 and I was done at 2:55. Of course, I would coach and do other things beyond my school day, but I constantly feel like I have to be busy all of the time and that people are watching me. And in my business, I'm like, okay, I have done so much. I can rest. I can take a walk. But in my brain, all of the things I was hearing and people were saying to me, just in my professional space, not even all the other things, it stayed with me. And I didn't realize it till someone called me out on it. And said, why do you think that you have to have, like, for example, I have a private podcast. I have 23 episodes as I launch it. And someone's like, why didn't you launch that already? I'm like, oh, well, I needed more, and and why did I think that? Because when I dig deep, like you're saying, self-talk and the words that were being whispered or screamed at me were floating through my brain. So that's so powerful for coaches, parents, athletes, what you're saying to your teammates. And while we're here, because I've said it, once you spit it out, it's out there into the world. Have you ever had a moment where you've had to say, maybe either coach, professionally, personally, and you don't have to give all the details, where you had to then say, you know what, I said something I regretted, or I did something here. How did you deal with that? And what would you say to people listening?
Absolutely have said things that I wish I didn't say. Mm-hmm. And if I had to point to why, it's probably because I let an echo get too loud in my own brain and allowed my own insecurities, which were the byproduct of those echoes, kind of take over and make me say something that I was thinking, right? Without the calmness of recognizing that what I just said or what I'm about to say is the wrong thing to say. And I think that Recently, I was at 3 weeks ago, we were at a softball tournament. And this particular year, our girls are playing, at an age group up, and they're really pushing themselves. And that's coming with some losses. It's coming with some lessons. It's coming with some thumping. But we were on the field and we were making errors left and right. And I screamed. And Amy will tell you, my wife will say, you're not the scream coach, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's not who you are. But it's happened to be who I was at that moment. And we had a 3-hour break between games. We went out to lunch, me, Amy, and Bella, got back. And I didn't wait long to come back to the girls and say, hey, here's the deal. I screamed, this isn't what this is about. And I took accountability for saying what I was thinking. That's not doing, I didn't do anything wrong because I said what I was thinking. The problem was, why was I thinking it? And I explained to them, that even sometimes I get frustrated. I get frustrated with my inability as a coach to make you guys succeed. And that's not right. It's not their fault, right? It's not their fault that I felt that way. It's not right that if it doesn't change that's the way I felt. And it doesn't change the fact that it comes from, insecurity. And I just called myself out on it in a way, that was public, because those are the people I made it public when I yelled at them in front of all their parents and the other coaches and the other team. I made it public. So I had to accept it, responsibility for it in a public way. But even in private, couple weeks this season, a girl on my team who had made an error, and it was an effort error. Like, we all know that there's errors because of focus. There's an error because of skill, right? And then there's an error because you didn't put in the effort. It was definitely an effort error.
Right. And
I called her out in front of everybody that I needed more from her, and that's not acceptable. But again, praising public and scolding private. When I apologized, because it's not right to call people out in front of people. Like, if you're going to call them out one-on-one. And I did apologize to her later, because that's not, the right way to go about it. It's not a bad thing for them to see you make a mistake.
Love these
either. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's perfect.
We're all going to make mistakes.
Right.
And when they can see someone that they respect, someone who's giving them so much positive floating through their brain, oh, he makes mistakes too, that makes it easier for that person, individuals in general, to be like, all right, everybody makes mistakes. I think a lot of times people put people up on a pedestal and think, I could never do that. I could never be like that because, their long list of echoes in their brain.
Sure.
But when they see other people keep it real, whatever you want to call it, make mistakes. And I love how you said publicly own it. That's the sign, in my opinion, of a true leader. I was always craving that in my workplace as a teacher, just in general in life. Things are going to happen. You need to own it. And I would respect you more, even if it was a little crazy. A lot of times people can't do that because they don't want to show that side of them. But I think that they're at a disadvantage. You're a stronger leader when you can. People
don't want to be hypocrites, but I think that a lot of times when we make mistakes, we do these things, like we run the risk of being hypocrites when we don't own it, right?
Yeah,
like
it's to own it, right?
And even privately, you can be like, man, I never should have said that. And somehow or another, you can reconcile it in yourself to not feel hypocritical because you've come to terms with it internally that, yes, it was the wrong thing to say. I admit it to myself and, maybe I should have done better. Like that's certainly an important part of the situation is to recognize yourself. But if you don't address it with the right audience that deserves to be, that's when your reputation as a hypocrite can grow. And that's really can be dangerous, can be destructive,
It can. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's important for people to hear it. And I love how you approached it. People are definitely going to be able to steal that. I could keep you forever, Ken. You and I, as my husband was saying, we could talk and talk, but I'm not going to do that. I know you're a busy guy.
We have to save something for the next episode, right?
Exactly. We might have to make a series. So many things we could talk about. So before I get to the last question, I would love for you to drop your podcast and even your company. I'll put those links in the show notes because I think people would love to connect with you on probably a lot of different levels. So if you don't mind, where can they find you?
Yeah. So obviously, as a mortgage professional, if you're looking to buy, sell, or refinance, I have connections in the real estate world for that and also originate loans. Even though I'm a manager, I'm producing branch manager. So I still help everybody originate their mortgage so that they can buy their house. As a branch manager, if you're a loan officer out there and you're not thrilled with the company you're working for and you want to, have a conversation about what it would look like if you joined our team, Princeton Mortgage, you could probably, this is me getting yelled at by one of my teammates here. You can find me at KJordan at PrincetonMortgage.com is my email address, or if you Google Ken Jordan, Princeton Mortgage, I'll come up. And then last but not least, I do have a podcast, Selling the Dream, which is really just a fun thing that I do with my college roommate because he was in sales. I was in sales. We both, actually, when we graduated Penn State, we both worked for the same company selling ads in the phone book, which is a whole nother story.
You're both Penn Staters, right?
Yes, both Penn Staters.
Well, I'm going to say that's got to be something all my Penn Staters are going to want to listen to.
So it's a fun podcast that's geared towards salespeople, entrepreneurs, and leaders where we just hang out and talk like this.
Yeah, I've listened to many episodes, so I recommend people check that out. And I will drop the links for all of that right in my show notes so you can connect with Ken, check out the podcast, and reach out to him if you need to for the mortgage side of things as well. All right, so we're going to jump to the last question here. If you were the main character in the movie called The Champion Within, the screen goes to black, we're left on a cliffhanger, what is that audience screaming, going to social media saying, I hope Ken does this? What's happening?
If I'm the main character, the story is coming to an end and it goes to black and they're screaming, I hope that they're screaming it because if they are, that means that I'm at a point where I'm trying to make a very, very important decision and something's holding me back that shouldn't be holding me back. And that's something that happens to me all the time. I think it happens to everyone. And sometimes you just have to take action. I hope that whatever it is, I'm at a point where I need to jump in with both feet and the audience is screaming, do it.
And I'm excited to see what that is for you next now. We're all going to be leaning in to see what you do next, and you should do it. You're right. Those echoes in our brain sometimes and our limiting beliefs creep in, but usually when we just do it, I love Nike, great things happen or there's a net to catch you. If not this, something better. That's what I always try to do. Anyway. All right, Ken. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, your journey, and we definitely will be chatting again. I really appreciate your time hanging out with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, champions, have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with Kate today. And whether you're going to coach, teach, cheer from the sidelines, or hitting the field yourself, remember, mindset is everything. Don't forget to follow the show for the latest episodes, as we all need a little extra motivation, humor, and sanity in our busy lives. Now, go and unleash your champion within you, one step at a time. We're always rooting for you.